Call of War World War II is a free online strategy game that gathers millions of players worldwide. You fight up to 100 other players in real time in games that can take weeks to complete. The games feature World War II historically accurate maps and units that allows you to create your own path and rewrite history. Call of War World War II is fully cross-platformed. Your objective is to take over the world. Define your own strategy, build powerful armies by combining dozens of different unit types, and fight for world domination. I've set up a special game of Call of War for the first viewers who click the link in the description. Go to the website or app and type my name in the search bar and enter the password Mark Felton. Mark Felton Productions viewers are getting a special gift. Click on the link below to get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. The offer is available for only 30 days, so click the link in the description, choose a country and fight your way to victory in epic real-time battles. In 1937, Imperial Japan launched an undeclared war against China. The aim was the invasion and occupation of eastern and southern China, which contained all the major cities and most of the industry. 6 years earlier, Japan had occupied the Chinese-controlled region called Manchuria, after creating military confrontations with Chinese forces there. Manchuria was vital to Japan's future expansionist plans, containing huge coal deposits and plenty of space for Japan's surplus population to settle. In 1931, the last emperor of China, Puyi, was installed by the Japanese as Emperor of Manchukuo, as the Japanese renamed the region. The Republic of China was ruled by strongman Chiang Kai-shek from his capital in Nanking in the middle of China. But Chiang's regime was riven with corruption and mismanagement, and the Chinese nationalist military forces were numerous but weakly led and often poorly equipped. When the Japanese made their grab for eastern China in 1937, the Chinese military was overwhelmed, and though some units fought heroically, the much more professional and aggressive Imperial Japanese Army soon conquered vast swathes of the country, butchering and abusing Chinese prisoners of war and civilians as they went. Culminating in the worst atrocity known as the Rape of Nanking in December 1937. Chiang and his battered army progressively withdrew west, trading land for time to reorganize, establishing a new headquarters and capital at Chungking. Chiang desperately needed military help and called for an international force to help fight the Japanese. The first unit was a small squadron of British, American, and Dutch volunteer pilots, remembering that none of those countries was at war with Japan. Its 36 aircraft were all destroyed by 1938, and its impact was minimal. The Chinese Air Force numbered 500 aircraft in 1937, but due to corruption and poor training, few were serviceable. The types were also outclassed by more modern Japanese aircraft, and the Chinese Air Force largely destroyed. Funnily enough, the first really significant overseas military aid China received came not from the Western powers, but from the Soviet Union. In 1937, the USSR and China had signed a non-aggression pact, realizing that Japan was a threat to both nations, and in 1938 the Soviets sent 2 bomber squadrons and 4 fighter squadrons to aid nationalist China. This Soviet force was completely self-contained, bringing all its own ground crew and supplies with it. Its presence permitted what remained of the Chinese Air Force to regroup around the city of Kunming. 400 Soviet aircraft were also supplied to China and several flying schools set up. But though welcome, the Soviet contribution was too small to provide full fighter defenses for China, especially as Japanese bombers ranged deep into the country, even bombing the capital at Chungking. In October 1940, Major General Mao Paozhou, operations director for the Chinese Air Force, was sent to the United States to purchase 650 new planes. But after some negotiations, due to British requirements taking precedence, Mao was only able to buy 100 Curtiss P-40s from a cancelled British order. The Chinese also actively recruited a new group of foreign pilots, Americans, led by General Claire Chennault. Chennault would be in charge of recruiting the actual pilots, while the Chinese would provide the planes, ground crews, and other supplies. America in 1940 was still limited by the Neutrality Acts and couldn't be seen to be aiding China openly against Japan. The help had to be private and unofficial. In effect, Chennault would create a private air force. Two corporations were created to circumvent the Neutrality Acts: the Central Aircraft Manufacturing Company, or CAMCO, which would employ all the pilots on contract, and General Chennault holding the position of supervisor, and the China Defense Supplies Corporation based in Washington, D.C. The unit that did all the flying was called the American Volunteer Group, the AVG, and by June 1941 numbered 100 pilots and 150 mechanics. One of the critical places that had to be defended from Japanese bombing raids was the Burmese port of Rangoon. All the supplies that came into China from the Allies were first landed at Rangoon and then taken into China using the Burma Road. The road terminated at Kunming in Yunnan province and was Chiang's lifeline for supplies and equipment to keep his armies going. From December 1941, the Japanese determined to cut this artery. The AVG's first deployment was to defend both ends of the Burma Road, with one squadron at Rangoon and two at Kunming. The AVG P-40s wore very distinctive nose art. The famous teeth painted on the noses of the P-40s was not a tiger's mouth, but rather a shark's. It was copied from a photograph AVG pilots saw of a Royal Air Force P-40 of number 112 Squadron operating in North Africa. The British had themselves copied the design from that adorning the front of a German Messerschmitt Bf 110 heavy fighter of ZG-76 operating in Crete. The name Flying Tigers came from the AVG's support group based in D.C., China Defense Supplies, presumably after the tigers that lived in Burma and southeast China at the time. Another famous image associated with the AVG was the blood chit, a special patch sewn to the back of AVG pilots' jackets. It was designed to help them if they were shot down in China. Below the Chinese flag, characters stated, "This foreign person has come to China to help in the war effort. Soldiers and civilians, one and all, should rescue and protect him." The Flying Tigers' first action occurred on the 20th of December 1941, after the US had entered the war against Japan following the 7th of December sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. Throughout December, AVG squadrons flew intercept missions against Japanese bomber formations, escorted by fighters, the Flying Tigers being supported by Brewster Buffaloes of No. 67 Squadron, Royal Air Force. A particularly heavy attack was made on Christmas Day when 63 Japanese bombers, escorted by 25 fighters, were intercepted over Rangoon by 14 P-40s of the Flying Tigers and 15 RAF Buffaloes. 35 Japanese aircraft were downed. The Flying Tigers were ground away by attrition as the Japanese launched their ground offensive into Burma in January 1942. They were in constant battle with Japanese bombers and fighters, AVG pilots scoring 73 victories by the 24th of January. Rangoon was captured by the Japanese, and the AVG relocated north. By now, aircraft attrition had significantly eroded the Flying Tiger squadrons. The Allies only had 38 aircraft, including 8 Flying Tigers P-40s, to oppose 271 Japanese aircraft. On the 23rd of March 1942, with just 4 P-40s left, the AVG abandoned Burma and relocated to Loiwing, just inside China. Fresh F-40s were sent over, and by the 8th of April, the AVG numbered 12 aircraft at Loiwing. Dogfights continued with the Japanese. Morale among the American pilots was at rock bottom. Very deprived living conditions, bad weather, and extremely dangerous missions took its toll upon pilots at the end of their tethers. In mid-April, the pilots revolted. 24 pilots resigned, but Chennault managed to persuade all but 4 to withdraw their resignations or face desertion charges, but the damage was done. The AVG relocated to Baoshan, China, and the Flying Tigers now fought hard to support Chinese troops resisting a Japanese invasion force into Burma. With America officially in the war, there seemed to be little point in continuing to maintain the Flying Tigers as a separate independent force. In July 1942, what remained of the AVG was absorbed into the China-American Task Force, with Chennault as commanding officer, but only a handful of AVG pilots actually volunteered. The CATV, in turn, was absorbed into the US 14th Air Force in 1943, becoming China's main air defense force. In total, the AVG destroyed 296 Japanese aircraft, for the loss of 14 of its pilots. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.